You become the 51st state and you get it for free? But why? Why is this happening? The short answer: Donald Trump is trying to distract from his own domestic challenges, and Canada often becomes the default target whenever he wants to make headlines. He goes back to the 51st state line again and again. Every time Washington faces pressure, Canada seems to take the hit. In early October, Trump revived his favorite joke about Canada being the 51st state while simultaneously announcing a fresh round of tariffs. Softwood lumber from Canada now faces a duty of over 35%, and starting October 14th, upholstered furniture like couches and chairs will also be hit. For many Canadians, it feels like they've been turned into a political prop. Whenever Trump faces government shutdowns or domestic turmoil, Canada becomes the easiest distraction. But the bigger question isn't just about unfair targeting. It's whether these repeated blows to Canada end up hurting the United States itself. The list of tariffs has steadily grown throughout 2025. Lumber, furniture, pharmaceuticals, even film and entertainment have all been potential targets. On paper, it looks like a strategy to pressure Ottawa. In practice, it raises costs across North America. Softwood lumber is critical for U.S. housing construction, and a 35% duty drives up costs for builders, and ultimately for American families. The same applies to furniture and other consumer goods. The Conference Board of Canada noted in September that industries tied to autos and manufacturing are struggling under these tariffs, with ripple effects back into U.S. supply chains. Trump's approach may earn short-term applause, but it risks hollowing out the very industries he claims to protect. Instead of strengthening U.S. leverage, it traps both economies in higher costs and uncertainty. Prime Minister Mark Carney has avoided public negotiations with Trump. His August 1st deadline for a deal passed without resolution, though conversations are reportedly ongoing. This silence has been criticized domestically, but it's a deliberate strategy to avoid giving Trump a public sparring opportunity. Meanwhile, Carney is preparing to define his government with a new budget on November 4th. Critics argue Canada isn't doing enough to attract investment, yet internationally, he's been traveling to London, Europe, and Asia to diversify trade ties. Deals with the EU, UK, and Indonesia are in progress. Investments in critical minerals like cobalt and nickel aim to secure Canada's role in the electric vehicle supply chain. These efforts take time, but they signal a long-term plan to reduce dependence on the U.S., even as tariffs pile up in the short term. The contrast is striking. Trump relies on tariffs and rhetoric about Canada to distract from domestic issues. Canada absorbs the immediate shock, but it has options. By opening new markets and strengthening domestic supply chains, Ottawa is playing the long game. So, who bears the heavier cost here? For American consumers, tariffs basically mean, well, higher prices at the checkout. For U.S. industries, there's the headache of disrupted supply chains. On the Canadian side, there's some short-term pain, sure, but also a stronger push to diversify where they buy and sell. What was intended to weaken Canada could, honestly, backfire on the U.S. economy itself. This pattern of kind of turning Canada into a political punching bag might score points in the short run, but it seriously risks eroding American economic strength in the long term. During harvest season, Canadian farmers rely on these massive combines that cost millions of dollars. For decades, a lot of them came straight from a factory in Omaha, Nebraska. But this year, things changed in a big way. Claas, which is one of the world's largest combine makers, has mostly sold to prairie farmers. Its machines used to be built in Nebraska, but now production is moving to Germany as a strategic response to all the trade tensions. Claas announced it will no longer produce Canadian-bound machines in the U.S. Instead, production is shifting to Harschwinkel, Germany. And this isn't about quality or technology, it's about trade policy, plain and simple. Exporting from Germany lets Claas use the Canada-EU trade deal, which, eliminates most tariffs. Exporting from the U.S., on the other hand, means facing unpredictable new duties. A policy that was meant to bring production back to America has actually pushed it abroad. When Trump returned to office in 2025, he launched a fresh wave of tariffs. The White House argued that higher duties would force multinational companies to produce more in the U.S., cutting reliance on imports and, well, creating American jobs. Yet Klaus really shows how that logic is falling apart. Because Canada and the European Union already have a free trade deal, it's both cheaper and safer for companies to serve Canadian customers from Germany. According to the European Commission, CETA has eliminated tariffs on more than 98% of goods between Canada and the EU since 2017. This framework gives a German-made combine a clear advantage over one shipped from Omaha. The contradiction is pretty striking. Shipping a machine across the Atlantic is now more cost-effective than moving it just across the border into Saskatoon. Instead of attracting factories to the U.S., these tariffs are actually pushing them away. What's happening is simple firms, with operations in both the U.S. and Europe, are sidestepping the tariff issue entirely by producing for Canada in countries not affected by U.S. trade disputes. And, experts warn that Klaus may only be the start. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, is set for renegotiation in 2026, which just creates more uncertainty for long-term investments. Companies want stable rules, and when they don't find them in the U.S., they look elsewhere. In this environment, Canada quietly benefits. Farmers in Saskatchewan still get the equipment they need, but now prices are shaped by European trade rules rather than American tariffs. Ottawa hasn't had to spend political capital. It's simply leveraging existing agreements like CETA and expanding new ones, including the comprehensive economic partnership signed with Indonesia in September 2025. By keeping its doors open, Canada positions itself as a reliable partner, while the U.S. comes off as less predictable. The message is clear. If it's cheaper to ship across an ocean than across a heavily tariffed border, companies will do exactly that. The outcome here is a lesson in unintended consequences. The Trump administration promised to restore American manufacturing, but the first visible result is a major company moving Canadian production to Europe. Fewer jobs and less investment in Nebraska, more confidence for Canada's trading partners, and greater reliance on agreements that, exclude the U.S. This pattern could easily spread to pharmaceuticals, autos, and lumber, which have already been hit by late September 2025 tariffs. When firms see it's easier to produce abroad than navigate U.S. tariffs, the damage just deepens. What was meant to rebuild America now risks hollowing it out. Trade policy isn't just about protection. It's about creating a predictable environment where businesses can plan. Without that certainty, the backfire is almost inevitable, leaving Canada to quietly collect the gains. So, Canada has also moved boldly on new trade deals. In late September, Canada signed the Canada-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CPA, which, by the way, is its first ever bilateral trade deal with an Asian country. Once this agreement is fully implemented, over 95% of tariffs on Canada's exports to Indonesia will be reduced or eliminated. This wasn't just another handshake, it was a clear signal that Canada isn't going to wait for Washington to act. The timing and the choice of partner were, pretty strategic. Indonesia, with nearly 300 million people and a GDP of around $2 trillion, is Southeast Asia's largest economy and is projected to rank among the world's top 5 within decades. For Canada, this really creates a massive new outlet for goods and services, showing that while Washington builds walls, Ottawa is opening doors and actively reshaping its trade future. The government has stated that once the Canada-Indonesia Agreement is fully enforced in 2026, over 95% of tariffs on Canadian exports will be eliminated or reduced. This opens up competitive access for agricultural products, fertilizer, wood, financial services, and clean technology. The deal also includes a partnership between Export Development Canada and the Indonesia Investment Authority, which is aimed at mobilizing $800 million in private capital for infrastructure, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. This isn't just about moving goods across the ocean, it's about positioning Canadian industries in one of the fastest-growing markets in the world. By choosing Indonesia, Canada also secures a foothold in the Indo-Pacific, a region that controls vital shipping lanes and is rapidly industrializing. For Canadian businesses, this move combines commercial growth with strategic geopolitical presence. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the Trump administration has imposed reciprocal tariffs since early September on a wide range of imports. Pharmaceuticals face a 100% duty starting October 1st. Heavy trucks, cabinets, and furniture face tariffs of 25 to 50%. The stated aim is to bring jobs back to America, yet these tariffs have caused higher costs for consumers and disrupted supply chains on both sides of the border. Canada trades roughly 145 million Canadian dollars per day with the US, and these new duties create uncertainty and higher costs for Canadian companies. Against this backdrop, the Indonesia Agreement isn't just advantageous, it's necessary. It guarantees tariff-free access, a stable investment environment, and even includes defense cooperation strengthening maritime and cybersecurity ties. The implications for the United States are significant. By standing outside these arrangements, the U.S. risks losing market share where Canada is now more competitive. Saskatchewan potash will meet Indonesia's fertilizer demand, Canadian grain and lumber will flow to Jakarta at lower costs, and Canada is also tying itself into Indonesia's critical mineral sector, especially nickel, a key element for electric vehicle supply chains. Indonesia also signed a trade deal with the European Union that same week, moving both Europe and Canada closer while leaving Washington on the sidelines. For American workers, the danger isn't just higher import prices, it's missed opportunities abroad. Trump's tariff policy, instead of pulling partners closer, is pushing them away. The Canada-Indonesia deal is the clearest sign yet that allies are moving on, finding new markets, and building ties without waiting for Washington. On defense, a similar pattern is unfolding. Prime Minister Mark Carney, speaking in New York, confirmed Canada will not split its submarine contract. Instead, the choice is now between a German-Norwegian design and a South Korean design. Both meet Canada's operational requirements and high standards, but notably, there is no American option. While this might seem like a technical choice about fleet composition, it's much more. Having a single class of submarine improves efficiency. Shared spare parts, unified expertise, and predictable maintenance reduce long-term costs. But it also signals independence. In a context of strained U.S. relations, the absence of a U.S. bid speaks volumes. Tariffs meant to coerce compliance are pushing a close ally elsewhere. The contract is substantial, around 20 to 24 billion Canadian dollars for roughly 12 conventional submarines. New procurement rules require that defense contracts deliver clear domestic benefits, Canadian jobs, industrial partnerships, and long-term technological capacity. Bidders have adapted their proposals accordingly. Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems offers the Type 212CD, proven and NATO-compatible, but with later delivery slots. South Korea's Hanoa Oceans proposes the KSS-3, larger with lithium-ion batteries, potentially delivering the first vessel by 2032 and 4 by 2035, plus co-investments in Canadian industries ranging from battery production to LNG and aerospace. This illustrates a broader trend. Since April 2025, U.S. tariffs of 10 to 50% across metals, autos, and farm products were framed as fair policy. Canada, instead of chasing exemptions, has turned procurement into an industrial strategy. It's joined a $1.3 trillion European Union initiative and implemented domestic rules favoring Canadian firms first. The result, tariffs intended to bind allies closer, are accelerating diversification. A defense program that once would have automatically gone to an American contractor now opens competition to Europe and Asia. Washington loses revenue, influence over maintenance contracts, training, and technology standards. The risks are clear. Germany offers NATO integration but slower delivery. South Korea promises speed but untested exports. Both can operate submerged over 3 weeks, essential for Arctic patrols, and rely on advanced battery technology. The outcome matters far beyond defense. It will determine supply chains and economic ties for decades. Tariffs designed to increase leverage have instead caused a visible backfire, pushing Canada toward Europe and Asia and reshaping the balance of industrial and strategic alliances.